I thought I'd share my thoughts on the Trump judgment amounts. If it were anyone else but Trump, would you award $83 million? He was fined $5 million in court for sexual assault as he wasn't found liable of rape. The $83 million is for defamation, his tweets, in other words, not the actual act, which she herself admitted wasn't sexual in an interview, as long as it wasn't deep-faked, that is. Furthermore, she claimed that there was no one in the store, but later on talks about how attentive the store employees are with clients typically, two statements which seem to contradict themselves. Beyond this, she didn't speculate. She didn't say maybe this happened out of doubt, or maybe if she was drugged or otherwise impaired to affect her memory. Her exact words were, "This wasn't sexual." Trump's lawyer wasn't allowed to play this clip, which aired on national television as a defense in court, which is suspect on its own. Regardless, all of this is irrelevant because in a defamation case, what you're looking at is libel, the content of his tweets. The sexual assault case was settled already for $5 million. Therefore, if someone claimed you were defaming them online, would you accept an $83 million fine or would you appeal? Everyone who hates Trump watches with glee without realizing it sets a legal precedent in New York State and, as an example, elsewhere in the US. If it's happening to him, any online troll could be liable for at least the amount if one decides to sue. Meaning, your online comments can be found via metadata and triangulated via IP address and subpoenaed, which means if you ever made a comment online calling Trump a rapist or defaming someone else as a rape apologist when Trump was found unliable, you can now be sued to the tune of at least $83 million. Even if you were being sarcastic, because apparently algorithms, astute as they are, still can't tell the difference between sarcasm and a user's true thoughts, again, you can be sued into bankruptcy now, thanks to this precedent. The judgment went from $5 million for actual sexual assault he wasn't found guilty of, and jumped to $83 million for tweets. Tweets. Does this make sense? Shouldn't a judgment be lesser for lesser offenses and higher for worse ones? $83 million is 16 different $5 million awards she could share with sexual assault victims, maybe 8 different rape victims whose assault was actually sexual. But do you know what grand plans Carroll has for the money? Well, according to her, shopping sprees with women who can already afford shopping sprees. No philanthropy, but good old retail therapy at Bergdorf's or wherever else she'd go, while others are living in tent cities and single parents can't afford to feed their kids. I'm not saying she shouldn't do what she pleases with her own money, like the reasonable $5 million she got for winning her sexual assault case. What I'm saying is that when she wins an outsized and unfair amount based on tweets and she herself is saying she's going to do good with the money, no one is thinking shopping with the upwardly mobile is a qualifiable charity. Now let's look at New York State's Trump financial fraud case, where he was originally ordered to pay a whopping $453 million. $453 million. It's since been reduced, but let's just look at this initial amount, which is egregious. This was based on a claim that he submitted false information, inflating the value of his properties in documents to obtain loans for dealing financing, which netted him a return. This deal was at the bank's discretion. If they had a problem with Trump's valuations, they were free to refuse the loan, but they didn't. Do you know what they did instead? Similar to the previous credit facility review, the risk management team utilized Deutsche Bank's valuation services group to estimate the value of the liquidation of commercial assets in bad market conditions and applied a 50% haircut to the valuation presented by the client. Hay also confirmed that in addition to the 50% standard haircut applied to most commercial real estate assets, the risk management team applied a 75% haircut to Seven Springs, as properties under development or not yet developed potentially have a large range of outcomes of their value. Essentially, what this is saying is that Trump submitted values saying, my properties are worth X, and then they took a look at it and they said, we don't necessarily have the same evaluation that you do. We're going to have that evaluation. And so if, let's just say, you say that your house is worth $5 million, the bank is going to tell you it's worth 2.5. I don't understand the false document claim. It just seems like it's because essentially if what you're saying here, using this information specifically, right? If you're selling a house, let's say, because I'm looking at the end result of the situation, right? The end result is at the end of this business deal, the bank got paid back, they got paid interest, and if I'm not mistaken, they probably got referrals for other clients who might want to borrow and pay them interest from Trump. So essentially, the deal resulted in a net positive. The reason why, for example, Jon Stewart criticizing Trump was an issue was because Jon Stewart also had an inflated real estate price, which was 8 times the value of his property, and as a result, the person that he sold to lost $4 million instead of gaining. right? Like maybe it's possible that the buyer thought that they might have been able to profit from the deal, like they might have been able to resell above the 17 million that they paid. Maybe they thought they could sell for 25. Who knows? I couldn't really say. But the point is, it's buyer beware, right? Caveat emptor. If you're going to buy a real estate property and the market's about to take a downturn, you counter an offer with something that's lower, which is exactly what Deutsche Bank did, which means that that would negate the whole fraudulent document overvaluation claim that the court is making, I think, right? The case should have ended there, but they later said he got preferential interest rates based on his valuations. The court documents themselves show this isn't true. What he did is compare rates between the private lending and the commercial lending divisions and picked the one with the lower rates. The bank knew he was doing this and they let him. McCarty calculated the defendants saved $72 million, a little almost $73 million on the Doral loan, 53 on the old post office loan, 17 million on the Trump Chicago loan, and 24 million on 40 Wall Street, because he was able to choose the commercial versus the private wealth lending, which is to the bank's discretion. The bank knew that he was looking between both private and commercial, and they decided, out of their own discretion, to allow him to pick the division that had the lower interest rate. That isn't a crime. It would be the equivalent of if, let's say, you were to name any product at your standard retail store, and then if you were to go to a big box discount store and you were to get the same item for less, is somebody else able to now sue you because you got the same item at a different price, a lower price? Is that what I'm understanding? Because I'm not understanding what the logic is here. Again, case closed. The argument for how acceptable the amount is seems to stem from Trump's net worth in the billions. Precisely, that's the whole point. Trump is a billionaire, and that's why he's being bled dry when he could be otherwise concentrated on campaigning. Now, my question is, couldn't one make the argument that allowing illegal immigrants to fly without proper documentation?
You've all seen the TSA checkline, of course. Well, I have news for you. Biden DHS has created another line, and here is the picture to prove it. This is a line in the Tucson airport, specially made for non-citizens. And as you can see, the sign says, non-U.S. citizens without passports enter here.
Easy.
You know what a valid form of ID is for an illegal alien according to TSA today? An arrest warrant. I'm not making that up. You get on a plane. An arrest warrant. This is not only an assault on an American citizen, but a grave threat to our national security. We also know that in the last 2 years, over 200 people on the terrorist watch list have been caught at the border that we know of.
Allowing human traffickers to traffic women and profit from it.
That's right. Let me give you just a snapshot of 3 of, we believe, human trafficking victims. They wanted to come to the United States. So the human trafficker arranged for them to come here illegally. And then they got a voucher from DHS, flew to Yonkers, New York. She set up their prostitution stings. She had a handler that went with them every place. And she said, on Friday, you give me $3,000 apiece. So for just these 3 people, who knows how many she was working, she made $9 grand a week. And she made sure they flew around the country. So we asked them, well, you came from New York to Tampa to Lakeland. Is that correct? Yes? How'd you get here? Well, we had this voucher from DHS. They told us they're flying around the country on this federal voucher. So get a load of this. They are flying around the country on a federal voucher to turn prostitution stings, and the girls aren't free to leave because they've got to pay back. That is a scary thing. We have them being victims. Even though they're here illegally, they're victimized. We have the people all throughout this country that are violating the law. The border's wide open. The drugs are all over killing our people, and we're just beside ourselves. And then we catch our own military people, a staff sergeant in the operation, is here with illegal people, supposedly having sex.
And allowing extremely recent undocumented immigrants without status nor proper documents per state voting rules all constitute actions that go against the, quasi-sovereign interest in protecting the integrity of the state and country. I'm paraphrasing for effect here, just follow along for a minute. What was the excerpt again? The state has a statutory interest under 63 parentheses 12, encompasses the prevention of fraudulent or illegal business activities and misconduct that is illegal for reasons other than fraud and still implicates the government's interests and guaranteeing a state and country that adheres to standards of fairness.
Just want to read this part here. It says, here, despite the false financial statements, it is undisputed that defendants have made all required payments on time. The next group of lenders to receive bogus statements might not be so lucky. New York means business in combating business fraud. Well, what about murder? What about human trafficking? What about shoplifting gangs? Shouldn't that be a priority over going after Trump for a deal that had just literally no victims and the bank benefited?
Couldn't one make the argument that admitting leagues of economic migrants who vastly inflate their suffering versus those who would legitimately qualify for asylum is fraud? What about if the government knows they might have exaggerated, but lets them in regardless? Or is it that the government, much like Deutsche Bank, evaluates the threat at their own discretion and makes the deal with entering migrants after their own due diligence? If you say it's the latter, then that would mean that the bank appropriately made their own measures and the deal was completed without fraud involved, and that Trump's inflations were irrelevant once the deal is done. Again, the difference here, or the end and continuing results, is no victims whatsoever resulted from the Trump deal. Who benefits from scores of economic migrants receiving more money in benefits and better accommodations than U.S. war veterans and American citizens requiring assistance? It isn't Americans by most accounts, and certainly not those already in need. Well, if you were urging those non-legitimate asylum seekers and without status nor proper ID to vote Democrat under the threat of deportation under Trump or another candidate, then it might be construed that Democrats do, employing fraudulent measures, I might add, if this case is a precedent for what fraud is and is not. I understand one is a financial fraud case and the other has to do with immigration, but the principle is what I'm referring to, also the end result. To be clear, immigration is how North America emerged, but using questionable measures such as admitting literal, unvetted criminals who commit assault on police officers, commit rape and murder, admit women into the country only to get trafficked using government flight vouchers, and allow others to fly around the country with arrest warrants as ID, and then ask other undocumented immigrants who haven't waited as long as legal immigrants have to vote, coincidentally right before an election just to hold on to office, is both unconstitutional and lacks integrity. Whether you support Trump or you don't, it doesn't take a genius to see what's going on here. If you're a genius and you don't see it, I'd question your honesty in evaluating the variables. It isn't about whether you support Trump, but whether you'd accept the precedent being set by these egregious, disproportionate, and outlandish settlement amounts. Thank you.